Greetings and welcome to Writers on Writing with your host, Dr. Brenda Greene. Writers on Writing comes to you every Sunday and gives you, our listening audience, an opportunity to hear writers from the African diaspora talk about their work, their life, and their craft. And you can also watch this on our YouTube station at the Center for Black Literature. This radio broadcast is paid for by Medgar Evers College. And I'm very, very pleased to have with me today the fabulous author, Ladee Hubbard. Welcome, Ladee.
Thank you. Thank you.
It's so nice to be with you again. Yes. And I so much enjoyed your book. You know, you just are really serious and careful writer in the sense of really doing the research. But I'd like to share with our audience some background about you. Ladee Hubbard is the author of The Talented Ribkins, which received the 2018 Ernest J. Gaines Award for Literary Excellence. Her writing has appeared in Guernica, the Times Literary Supplement, Arkansas International, Copper, Nickel, and Callaloo. She's also a recipient of the 2016 Rona Jaff Foundation Award and has received fellowships from various foundations. She currently lives in New Orleans. And some of your awards, you are now a Hartford Radcliffe Institute Fellow, yes, and a Berlin Prize Fellow, and you've had the McDowell Colony Fellow, and you have just a page of awards. So I want to congratulate you.
Thank you.
Looking forward to hearing about your views and your processes on your latest book, The Rib King.
Okay.
Okay. And I just want to share an excerpt that was from one of the reviews, and I think it really captures what happens. Upstairs, downstairs meets Parasite. This is from the Goodreads. The acclaimed author of The Talented Ribkins deconstructs painful African-American stereotypes and offers a fresh and searing critique on race, class, privilege, ambition, exploitation, and the seeds of rage in America in this intricately woven and masterfully executed historical novel set in the early 20th century that centers around the Black servants of a down on its heels, upper white class family. I think that really captures it. So I want to first start with, I kept saying, but she wrote The Talented Ribkins, and this is the Rib King. So you have this play on words with rib. You know, I don't know if this is, can you talk a little bit about that? What is the significance of that for you?
Of the ribs specifically?
Yeah, the ribs. You have the Talented Rib Kings, and then Ribkins, and then this book is the Rib King. So you're continuing this metaphor with the ribs, and I just wanted to know, was that conscious? What is the significance of that?
Well, the Rib King it's technically the second book. The Rib King is a prequel to the first book, in that the characters in The Talented Ribkins are his descendants. So he's actually mentioned, the main character of The Talented Ribkins mentions that he has there's a family patriarch, the Rib King, in the very first chapter. And so I started writing this while I was editing the first book, and it just, for a whole lot of reasons, it just became sort of an elaboration of like, I don't know, a sentence about this figure that was in the first book. So I just started to feel compelled to tell his story as well. Yeah. So they're all part of the same family.
Okay. Okay. Yes, you know, and that's the connection, you know, because it was going back and forth. And you also really, it explains why you continue in both of these books to really feature historical figures. You know, I looked at The Talented Ribkins as a play on The Talented 10th with W.E.B. DuBois. But you, in the story I know I'm going back. I'd hope I'm not confusing the audience.
No.
But
Oh.
in the Talented Ribkins, you talk about a family that has these special powers and how they, you know, they're advancing the civil rights movement and they're using magical realism. But some of those powers, those special powers that they have, are featured in the Rib King, where you begin the story about the Rib King and the main character, Mr. Sidwell, really having some kind of special powers too.
Yeah, and that's mentioned in the first chapter of the Talented Rib, when he's recalling this ancestry. He said he had this sense of smell, and he also mentions the sauce. The first book, in terms of the Talented 10th. So I was really interested in how that term is used now and how it's remembered and its relationship to what DuBois was actually trying to say in that essay. Yeah, and so I just wanted to make sort of talent something that was real, that people had to actually grapple with. So I guess that's where the magical real is. It's not just sort of this amorphous potential that people have. It's like a real thing that they have to grapple with. And it's also part of their, it's who they are as human beings, it's part of their personalities, and it's part of how they strategize for sort of surviving the world and moving through the world. So all of the talents in there are much more metaphorical. But he does mention the sauce, the Rib King sauce. And he also mentions that he had a sense of smell, which comes up in the Rib King as well. But no one pays any attention to it, really. Do you know what I mean? Like, yeah. So that was another thing too, is a lot of people have talents that go unrecognized for what they are, right? So that was another point of the first book as well.
Okay, so we're gonna move fast forward to the second book. Can you give a brief synopsis for our listening audience of the Rib King?
It's about an African-American man who is a servant of a wealthy family, the Barclay families, and he and the cook in this house, they invent a meat sauce. And the recipe is taken from them. It becomes a huge national sensation, but they never see any of the profits from that. And this man, August Sitwell, spends the rest of his life touring the country, giving cooking demonstrations as the Rib King. I mean, obviously there's a lot more that goes on. He actually considers himself the sole survivor of a community. Before he came to work, before he moved to the North and came to work for this family, he lived in an all-Black town in the South that was destroyed in racial violence following the Reconstruction. And he thinks he's the sole survivor. So while all this stuff is going on with the sauce, he has an encounter with some of the descendants of the people that destroyed his community. And this sort of sets him on a path for, I don't know, vengeance. Yeah.
Yeah. And you bring all of those themes up, you know, what happened, how the relationship between the Seminoles and Black Americans in the South, you know, the whole Jim Crow, you know, I kept, every time I looked at that phrase when they got on the bus, move back, you know, you have the Jim Crow, you have the challenges of what they've done with Black youth, the challenges of being raised as a Black man in this country. All of that is there.
Yeah. Well, it's very, I mean, I'm glad it makes sense to people. That's how I'll put it, because a lot of it was actually written in reaction to things that are going on now. And I think that part of the point was that you still have this level of worry and anxiety in terms of being a caregiver, because that's another, obviously, a big part of the Rib King's personality, is that he starts out, he just wants to preserve the life of 3 African-American boys that are working in the house with him. He's trying to be a caregiver. And I think that while all this other stuff is going on, he's really trying all these different strategies to negotiate the threat of violence, and none of them are fully adequate. So that's part of his frustration as well. And I think I really was interested in sort of the impact of history, that, you know, even the pushback that you're talking about, the way you get used to certain things, because none of the characters really pay much attention to the fact that, you know, every time a white person comes on the car, they're being told to move to the back, and they don't even really think about it because they have all this other stuff going on. But that these patterns, and they have an enduring impact. So as much as things had changed in 100 years, I was really struck by how on a fundamental level, so many things really haven't. And so I was really inspired to write it, thinking about the vulnerability of Black children to racial violence today. Yeah.
Yes, even, you know, the gang, the road gang of, you know, the white supremacists, all of that is there. You bring it together. You know, as I was reading it, I kept thinking about Paul Laurence Dunbar's "We Wear the Mask," you know, and how Mr. Sitwell is actually wearing a mask, and people do not understand exactly why he's doing what he's doing, why he makes this decision to go and tour, and to, you know, the mask, we wear the mask that grins and lies. It hides our cheeks and shades our eyes. This debt we pay to human God, with torn and bleeding hearts we smile, and mouth with Maya subtleties. And that's where, isn't that what he was doing?
Yeah,
he was wearing a mask.
Yes. So that was another, yeah, and people get confused for the mask a lot, and it gets sort of inscribed in history as well. So the first part is they're all servants in this house. And I really was thinking about sort of minstrel stereotypes of people, and actually not directly at all, but the way he behaves in front of the people he works for is at times, in my mind, it was reminiscent of like an Uncle Tom figure, like, oh, I care so much about the house and your finances, I'm so worried about you, which is ridiculous. And the whole time he's really worried about the people that are working in the house, and he's just, they're like sort of an aside. But I was very conscious of when they interact with white characters, and specifically the people they work for, they're all sort of assuming these roles just to sort of get through it. And the same is true with Mamie as the cook, because there's a scene where she's like, she has to perform and interact with the guests and be this happy, yeah, I'm happy cook, but she has a whole other set of things on her mind while she's doing that, other priorities. But that's part of the job, is wearing the mask. And I think that's still true in a lot of ways, not as starkly maybe for a lot of people, but you are kind of required to perform your identity still, to just sort of get through and do what you need to do. Yeah.
You also are celebrating Black women. I think of the character Janie, who really grows, and looking at the ways that Black women do whatever they can to survive. And a lot of this is protecting the family.
Yeah, yeah. So in my mind, like, because the book is divided in two halves, and one is sort of Mr. Sitwell's story, and the other one is Jenny's story. In the first half, Jenny is a maid she's also a servant. She goes on and becomes, you know, she's an inventor, and she has her own product that she wants to sell. So yeah, they're sort of different reactions. They're actually dealing, in my mind, with a lot of the same tensions, but they are doing it in very different ways, right? So and hers is much more, I don't know, it's much more based on hope. They're both performers, but I think their relationship to performing is very different, right? So also because Mr. Sitwell spends a lot of time, he's also hiding from himself.
Yes.
And Ginny is not doing that. And so it affects how she interacts with other people.
Right.
Yeah.
So what was the highlight for you in writing this novel? What's the most important? You talked about really wanting to expose the violence and relate that to what's going on, along with giving the history and really showing the complicated lives of Black people. You complicate this and you complicate our history. But what was a highlight for you in constructing this novel, and even in both your novels?
Well, I think that in this novel, for me, that there is in the first part probably a lot of nihilism, and there's reasons to be a bit nihilistic, right? But I really wanted to, I don't think that people would have survived everything that they have been through if they were particularly realistic, like, you know what I mean? And so for me, Ginny was really important because I do think that she represents a kind of sustaining force that I feel in terms of sort of African-American history and culture, right? To just keep going. And also, just because you mentioned the other book, that was part of the virtue of Johnny Ribkins and the Talented Ribkins for me as well, is to just keep going and keep trying, and not to sort of accept an obstacle as the end. So I really wanted to sort of capture that as well, and not in like a Pollyannish or unrealistic way, but I do think that you know, you sort of have to claim your own reality sometimes, you know, and it's very it's not practical, it's not realistic, but people do find a way to keep looking for something else, right? Something else to try. And I really have so much respect for that, and I think it's so important. So that was what I wanted to represent as well. This is very important to me personally.
So can you talk about your process for writing? What is your writing process? It's definitely informed by literary texts and writers, but what is the process of your craft? What do you do? You're here at this writing retreat. If you can share what that is.
I read a lot of books, and I actually read a lot of history and just all kinds of things. And I try to write every day because I just do, but mostly like preparing for stuff. In a way, I feel like trying to figure out how to write a novel and how to structure a novel. It's sort of like trying to figure out how to formulate a question. So it'll just be things that are on my mind, and I wind up doing a lot of research. And I don't know, it just helps me to generate ideas. So that's what I've been doing here, is reading a lot of books.
Are you you're reading and writing? Are you working on another project? Because some people say when they actually begin another project, they have to put down what they're reading.
Oh yeah. You know what it is? It's reading other fiction it becomes a little complicated sometimes. I mean, you know, you get inspired, but I think like sometimes maybe it makes you question your own approach. Do you know what I mean? So, because some people are doing things so beautifully, but it's different from what I'm trying to do. And I think it's just to maintain a certain clarity about what the voice of the piece you're working on becomes a little difficult. But I read a lot of nonfiction and history and all kinds of things. Look at a lot of images also. So just trying to figure out like who the characters are, and, you know, have a context for what I'm trying to say.
So what is on your bedstand now? What are you reading now?
Oh, well, in terms of this book, I've been reading a lot of Derek Bell lately.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. So, and I was all, I can't believe I don't remember ever reading him in school. And I was in school for a very long time. And I was like, why did no one ever should give me this in school? So I've been reading a lot of, I've been reading a lot of about law, the history of law and race, because it just pertains to what I want to or what I'm writing about right now. So
Okay.
yeah.
And just following on that trend, I think about, and I share with my students that writers are in conversations with other writers. They are continuing they're continuing this. So who are you in conversation with as a writer?
Oh my gosh. I think, I hope I'm in conversation with a lot of people. I don't know. I mean, I think I'm I don't know who specifically I would say I'm in conversation with. I'm open to conversation.
Who have you been in conversation with? It's obvious it's been the people like DuBois, and you have the Garveyites. It's Langston Hughes, and you are in conversation with our literary writers, but you also, I guess, another way of looking at this is who the writers you're thinking about as you're writing.
Oh my goodness. Well, I think it depends on what I'm writing at the time. Like I think I'm maybe in dialogue with different writers at different points in specific pieces that I'm working with. So I don't know if that's helpful.
No,
It's
I
hard to
understand.
answer because I feel like I've been influenced and inspired by so many people. Do you know what I mean?
I understand that.
Yeah.
I understand.
Yeah.
So what is the message that you have for writers, for emerging writers, and people who are thinking about starting a novel?
Well, I think it's sort of coming out in a lot of my answers to your questions. I think I think it's really important to find your own voice and respect your own voice, even if other people don't, as they often will not, right? And because a novel is a huge undertaking, and I think it's hard often, or I found it hard when I was starting my first novel, to sometimes to sort of take myself as a writer seriously. And I think that's a really important thing to do. And it is about respecting your voice. And I also think that respecting your own voice is actually a big part of being able to respect other people's voices in an honest way. So it's important work, I think, trying to express yourself, and I think it's very difficult. So I really have a lot of respect for people who just keep going, you know what I mean, and keep trying, because there are a lot of obstacles, and that's not gonna change. Well, we can hope it changes, but it's probably not gonna change anytime soon. So, but I think it is really important to respect your own voice and to take yourself very seriously. Yeah.
Now, there are people, I just want you just to develop that a little bit more about, and talk about the importance of craft to you. There's people that the idea of respecting your voice is very, very important, but you have so many people saying, I can write, and they just begin writing. So
all right,
what part does craft
right. Craft is important to finishing too. And it's like to crafting is definitely important to study your craft. I think you're right? And that actually is part of being in dialogue with other writers, sort of respecting what it is that you're engaged with. So I say, like, you really need to, especially if you want to break the rules and do your own thing, you need to know, I do believe, what the rules are, so that you're consciously in dialogue with what it is you might be opposing. But I do take craft very seriously. I also do think that structure is a big part of what is expressed, right, in a literary work. So that has to do with craft as well. Like, how are you putting your ideas together on the page, and what are you saying by the way you are shaping your story itself? The shape of the story is part of the story. It inherently is part of what you're saying to people. So I do think it's important to take craft very seriously and to pay attention to it. Yeah. So if you want, that's an edited piece. So there's like starting the work and then there's finishing it. And I do think that's something that takes a long time to master. And I think it does definitely deserve a lot of thought and consideration.
Right. That's and there are people who really have not, unfortunately, sometimes don't even take the time to really study that, or to pay that much attention to it. So it's a challenge sometimes to kind of make sure you're doing both. The craft becomes, okay, I'll think about that later. And they don't understand the importance of studying the craft. And that's what I'm getting at. It's studying the craft.
Yeah. And you do learn a lot from reading and really, like, thinking about your reaction to what you're reading, like things that you do like, as well as things that you don't like, and trying to figure out why, what did the writer do here? Do you know what I mean? Like,
yes.
That's really important too. So what how did they put these ideas together in such a way, or tell this story in such a way that it was moving to me? Or to look at it from the opposite side and be like, why is this not moving to me? And really, it's like, not, it's in there, it's already in you to a certain extent. But I think that just really paying attention when you're reading, you can learn enormous amounts from.
Your books both illustrate how these issues that you're starting in the early 20th century and continuing up, we are still dealing with that. So I really want to thank you for this conversation, and thank you for your writing. And I want to encourage our listening audience to go out and purchase The Rib King by Ladee Hubbard. It is a wonderful book. I read it very quickly. You're a great storyteller, and I love the way you use language, and you just get people thinking. I'm a person who underlines and marks. I'm interacting with the text, and that's what I was doing as I was reading your book. So I thank you so much for your story.
Thank you. That's really nice to hear. Thank you.
All right. And remember, the writer is always reading, the reader is always writing. Keep reading and writing. Empower yourselves as readers and writers. And write me at writers@mec.cuny.edu. You have been listening to Writers on Writing. This show is paid for by Medgar Evers College. And again, we thank Ladee Hubbard for sharing this time and space with us. Bye.
Thank you.